Let's chat about the Chargers, shall we? Justin Herbert getting some protection in a major way. The biggest move that the Chargers made in free agency, signing former Packer Corey Linsley. The Packers couldn't afford to keep him, so guess what? The Chargers come out as winners there. Linsley, an All-Pro in 2020, was placed on IR in December, but did make it back by the end of the season. Taking a look at some of the other moves the Chargers made there in the offseason, and keep in mind it is very likely impossible to compete with the Chiefs, but the Chargers at least trying to make it to the postseason, something they haven't done since 2018 and only twice since 2010. Let's welcome back in Brady Quinn and Pete Prisco. We are now in the Chargers war room. Let's recap their free agency. Brady, go ahead. It was all about investing into Justin Herbert. You know, we just talked about Corey Linsley, did a nice job highlighting that, but, you know, really even at their left guard, right guard spot, Ibushi, Failer from Pittsburgh, kind of solidifying the interior of the offensive line, and then adding a tight end, Jared Cook, who's, you know, still got some tread on the tires at this point in time in his career to replace what they lost in Hunter Henry. Now, that's not going to be able to do it. They'll still have to supply more talent out around him, but the bottom line is this entire offseason was about how can we help out, protect Justin Herbert, and maximize his skill set.
Yeah, and I think when you look at both Linsley and Feiler, they're going to be starters. I'm still concerned, though, about the left side of the offensive line. You know, Ibushi is a decent player, but he's more of a backup. The left tackle, Pipkins, is okay. So I think they addressed some major needs by getting Linsley, who's a really good center, and Feiler can play both guard and tackle. But they need more help there. And, you know, getting Jared Cook to replace Hunter Henry was a smart move. He's not going to be there for the long haul, but that's a good move. So you're right, Brady. It's all building around that young quarterback. And they do have some young receivers as well that they really like. So I think this offense is headed in the right direction.
All right, Pete, you touched on this for a second, protecting Justin Herbert. There was some pretty horrendous offensive line play, though, at time for the Chargers in 2020. So how much more of a point, though, does it need to be for them to protect him?
Well, yeah, and I think that's where the focus should be in the first round. I don't think there's any question about that. That's where the focus should be. You need to get a left tackle. They need to get a guy that they can plug in and play there. They've tried a bunch of different guys. It hasn't really worked out, and I think they need to get a young player that they can develop and draft, and there are a couple of them. When they pick there's going to be a few guys there that they can take, and you know, Christian Darrisaw is my favorite tackle in this class, and most people love Penei Sewell out of Oregon. I think Christian Darrisaw is going to be a lot like Laramie Tunsil, who's going to be a big-time player at left tackle. If he's sitting there, that's who I would take if I were the Chargers.
If Darrisaw is there, you're right. It's a no-brainer. I think this is really going to come down to, Pete, best available at that spot at 13. If there is a tackle they have a high rating on, they'll take him. Whether it's Darrisaw, Rashawn Slater, potentially Tevin Jenkins, you know, I could see them going any one of those directions. But I kind of look at this and I go, I feel like they need a cornerback. When you look at their defense, as good as that defense is, even with some of their rush players and Derwin James coming back off of injury, I still think they need a cornerback, even a couple of cornerbacks to help out Chris Harris. I mean, look, you're playing nickel now as your base defense more than 50%, almost 60% of the time. You're going to have three cornerbacks out there in the field. They better be able to cover. There's only one guy, and that's Chris Harris, that I feel confident in. The other two, they're going to be in for some long days versus some high-powered offenses in the AFC West. So it's cornerback for me early and often. I think this draft is deep enough at the tackle spot where you can find a quality starter in the second round.
All right, so options at 13. Ryan Wilson's latest mock draft, by the way, has them taking Rashawn Slater, offensive lineman here. So you said cornerback. We were talking about the Cardinals at 16 and some names they could or possibly could not see there when it comes to corner. Who could the Chargers see at 13?
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the big three will probably be there at that point in time. I think the run on corners starts probably at 10 with the Dallas Cowboys, and then at this point in time, it might end here, at least in looking at those three players taken between Patrick Surtain, J.C. Horn, as well as Caleb Farley. So those three will probably be gone. The only, you know, question may be if they are gone, do you go the tackle spot, or do they just value a tackle more so than you know what they're seeing right now in the cornerback market? And maybe they view this cornerback market or this draft class at cornerback being a lot deeper than what we're looking at. But bottom line is, one of those big three will be there. I would not be shocked if they didn't go that direction.
See, I think they have to go tackle. That's why Darrisaw and Slater are both guys that I think they have to give strong consideration to. Yeah, they need corner, but there are more corners, I think, in this draft than there are tackles, at least premier tackles. And Darisaul's a guy, you plug him in there, he's your left tackle, and now all of a sudden you look across that line, it's pretty darn good. So I definitely would go in that direction. But I could see corner as well. If somehow both Darisaul and Slater are gone, I think corner would be a possibility. But they have some guys that they could also look at the wide receiver, and that sounds crazy to think that. But what if Devontae Smith or Jalen Waddle fell to them? And I know they like some of their young receivers, but those guys are dynamic. And Mike Williams, he's been okay. Keenan Allen's not a kid anymore, so maybe they look at a big play wide receiver as well.
No way. Wait for someone to trade up, with you and get that compensation there and go get another tackle or a cornerback. See, I view this tackle class a little different than you, Pete. I think there's Penei Sewell and then kind of everyone else. And I think this is a much deeper draft than we want to give credit. Darisaul had a fantastic year this past year, but really this was by far and away his best year. You go back through the rest of the years, wasn't quite as solid for me. So I feel like there's a little bit of a risk there as opposed to the quarterback position. They're day one going to get a starter.
Since we talked a lot about corners here, I want to ask you about Caleb. Oh, go ahead, Pete.
No, I was going to say, kind of like Zach Wilson. He had one really good year, and now he's going number 2 overall. That's how it works, Brady.
Is that how it always works, Pete?
No, but you know that. Guys have good years, and they get drafted higher than they would have the year before. Yes, in a lot of situations, it does work that way.
I think you're part of the problem, Pete. I think you're part of the hype train behind it.
Pete has his own hype train here. All right, so really quickly before we move on to day 2, I did want to ask you about Farley because you mentioned it a couple times. He had this minor back surgery. His people say, look, he's going to be fine.
It's only minor if it's not being done on you.
There you go, exactly. But here's the thing. He used to be Ryan Wilson's CB1. In all of our mock drafts, the earliest anybody has him going is 28 right now. Is that way too far down for you?
No, I think this because there's a lot of concerns about the medical history. Look, it's a back injury. Usually when you have a back injury, and because I've had back surgeries, you're going to have more. It's not like it's all of a sudden going to, be magically fixed. You're not going to deal with it later on. So that's the concern here. And this is a player that you're getting, you're getting him obviously what you hope to be in 100% shape when you draft him. But you don't necessarily know. Again, we didn't have a combine this year. They did have the medical checkups in Indianapolis, but there's only really so much you can do as far as testing these guys, working these guys out, stressing them to really see where they're at. So, yeah, I think there's definitely a big concern about Caleb Farley's back. And that's why, look, when you look at all 3 of these cornerbacks, you probably got them ranked on your board 1, 2, 3. But you got a little M next to Farley. And that's where if all these guys are equal, you're going to pick Horn or Surtain above them because there's too big of a risk with that medical tag.
All right, let's go to day 2, Pete Prisco. You've been finding a lot of gems out there, watching a lot of tape. Who are some players that the Chargers could target in day 2?
Well, again, if they do go corner in the first round, then they're going to have to come back and get some kind of offensive tackle after that. And there's going to be some guys there. Leon Eichenberg from Notre Dame, Brady's school, is a guy that's a possibility for them. Because, look, he's a guy you can plug in and play at left tackle. Sam Cosmi's another one. Trey Smith is a guy, and people say, well, why do you have him up that high? If his medical's clear, and that's an important thing for them, if some teams will say not a problem, others will say it's a problem. He's a first-round talent. I mean, he has that type of ability, but the medicals concern him. And then Elijah Molden, I mentioned him earlier, as a second, third-round corner. And Anthony Schwartz, if you want to add some speed in the later rounds, or maybe even the second round, third round, I think that's a guy you keep an eye on. So I think those are potential 2nd through 7th draft picks for the Chargers.
Pete always is copying my notes when we do stuff like this.
Obviously.
I looked at wide receiver as a potential option for him, but I'm on the same track as him. Not necessarily so much in the second round, but in subsequent rounds where you still have guys, maybe like a Tutu Atwell or a Dwayne Eskridge who are still there, an absolute blazer out of Western Michigan. I love his guy, Daz Newsome. Daz Newsome's the top of the better than list there for Pete Prisco.
No,
he's the guy.
You got the wrong one.
Oh, excuse me. Who would you end up having then? Is Dwamie Brown?
De'Ami Brown, the other North Carolina receiver.
Well, look, they're both flyers, big play receivers, and I think they could help out. But I look at Jalen Mayfield, Alex Leatherwood, Dylan Radunes. I mean, they could all be there in the second round. I think those guys who could still get the job done for the Chargers at the left tackle spot. And then you look at trying to get one of those running backs. My favorite in this draft class, Demetric Felton. Now, he's not a guy that I think gets past the 4th round. I don't know how high he'll go. But you look at his tape from UCLA, his versatility as a pass catcher, as a running back, he'd be hard to pass up on, for me at least.
All right. Thank you guys so much. I love the shirts today. They're so cute, right? Like, did you guys plan it? No?
I don't know what you're talking about.
yeah, I called him this morning.
He's got Broncos colors on. I'm more like the Patriots, like red and blue.
That is what it is. All right.
What are you going to wear next week, Brady?
Taking a look at the Chargers odds going into the 2021 season right now. I had mentioned they have only made it to the postseason twice since 2010. So the Chiefs are minus 400 to win the AFC West. The Chargers coming in at plus 475 behind them. For the Chargers to make the playoffs, that is plus 145. Maybe you like it. All right, coming up, the return of Joe Burrow. What would the Bengals look like in 2021 with him, and what do they need heading into the draft to get those Super Bowl wins that Pete Prisco promised?
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.